Many people have asked for it, so here is my review of the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. This series was first published in the year 2005, and it was a series that was meant for children, and the author himself came up with the idea because his son had just been diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, and he would tell him stories based on Greek and Roman mythology. And he created the character of Percy, and he created the whole story, which would later become the Lightning Thief. And then when that story was done, his son said that he should do other stories with Percy going on other adventures, and that's how the story, how the series began. And I got into the series a little while back. I was kind of reluctant to get into it at first because I was concerned that because it was a children's book series, they weren't really going to touch on some of the issues in Greek mythology that I think are important to discuss when you're doing that specific type of story. But what I was really surprised at when I read the series was how, even though it did tend to skirt over some things, it handled the topics in a mature way, and the incest in terms of how it connected with all the gods was pretty much laid as it is in the original text. Well, original as it can get, technically. But it kind of varied a little bit when you got to the, Camp Half-Blood and how they interacted. But overall, what I liked about this series, besides it being very fast-paced, very fun, and having a protagonist I actually cared about, was the fact that while I was reading it, while of course there were things that made it, a different level for me as an adult, it never felt like it was dumb. Because, there's some children books that, are trying to direct this kind of issue towards kids, and it's very, toned down. Everything is kind of like, we think kids are stupid. This treats the audience with a sense of, yes, you're at the age where you have the wonder and you can have stretches in your imagination, but there's also logic towards it. Things make sense in this world that has been presented in Percy Jackson. And so I think that is what really made this series work for me, and why I enjoyed reading it, despite the difference in what the genre requires in terms of age. So what is the story about? Well, starting with the Lightning Thief, the series centers around the protagonist, Percy Jackson, who discovers during a trip that he is a half-blood. He is a demigod. He is the son of Poseidon. And because he is a half-blood, mythological monsters like the Furies are going to be coming after him to try and kill him, because the goal of, half-bloods and demigods is to slay these monsters. And so they come out and they often kill these young people. And the first book, The Lightning Thief, deals with them trying to figure out who stole Zeus's lightning bolt before he kind of goes apeshit, because as Zeus is prone to doing. The second book deals with them trying to find the Golden Fleece. The third book deals with them trying to find the Danico kids, who become more important later on. They are the children of Hades. And the fourth book deals with them trying to stop the labyrinth, because in this world the labyrinth has expanded to a degree where it can help, it can lead to any entrance. And so one entrance in the labyrinth leads to Camp Half-Blood, and Kronos and Luke are trying to get in. And I know that all sounds complicated now, but I'll explain it further on. And the final book deals with the big battle between Kronos and Luke and the entire camp. Hold on, I just saw a book. So as the series progresses, what happens is that Percy is part of a prophecy that states that one of the children of the big three will be part of a plan which will either save or destroy Olympus. And this ends up coming into fruition with the resurrection of Kronos, which happens throughout the entire series and finally reaches its climax in the fifth book. And so Percy, being the child of Poseidon, one of the big three, is coasted with the responsibility of bearing that burden. And so as he goes along these quests, this constant prophecy about him possibly dying and being either the one who will help or save Olympus, it's kind of something that goes in the back of his mind constantly, and it's one of the overarching themes in the story. There are a lot of characters, but let me just talk about what I enjoy about this series. So I feel like this series has always been enjoyable to me because of how it knows how to write its characters. I really enjoy the characters in Percy Jackson. I think that how he constructs the idea of Camp Half-Blood is really interesting. I find that how he handles the relationship between characters is really good. So who are the main characters in this series? The main characters in this series are really Percy Jackson, who is the son of Poseidon, Annabeth Chase, who is the daughter of Athena, Tyson, who is Percy's half-brother and a Cyclops. Later on, it is Nico, who is the son of Hades, and Grover, who is a satyr, and he has his own journey sort of thing going on. And they're really the main characters who we follow throughout this journey, and how their relationship grows and how they learn to interact and things like that. So, in a sense, it's very much like a regular hero's journey. He has a goal at hand, and he's going through them at different places. And I guess, you know, I just enjoy this series. But there are a few problems that I have had with it along the way. And because I'm talking about the whole series, we'll discuss something that happens throughout the entire series. So forgive me if there are spoilers, but I left a warning, so it wouldn't be a good deal. The issue that had been bothering me, that was kind of addressed in the final book, The Last Olympian, was I couldn't understand why these kids and teenagers, because that's really what the camp is made up of, in Camp Half-Blood, would choose to defend their parents when they're pretty much total strangers to them. I mean, just because they share DNA does not make them parents. And it was really frustrating to me when, you know, Percy would just so blindly, you know, defend Poseidon and support Poseidon when, you know, they do messed up things too. I mean, they kind of explained it in kind of sort of how they cannot really be involved with their children, but they keep having them. I mean, the reason why they have heroes is to help them. They need heroes. They need these kids. They don't have them out of love or out of, you know, real care. I mean, they just constantly have affairs and constantly have these children for their own preservation. It has nothing to do with actual affection. And it kind of, and it really bothered me because you had all these children and all of them went unclaimed because, you know, the big three, the whole thing about the big three is it's Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. And because of the prophecy, they were forbidden to have children. And they weren't supposed to, but, you know, Poseidon and Zeus, being the hornet that they are, broke that rule, and so they have had children. And in order to protect them, because they would have to be, you know, killed off or they're interrupting the prophecy, some of them went unclaimed. And there were other people, like, you know, who just did not get taken in by their parents and were left out to be screwed. And because of certain rules that they can't help with the kids, they have very little involvement, but they still don't take the responsibility of not having children in the first place. So the gods just come off as dicks, which is normal for Greek mythology. I mean, they are dicks. But the whole thing is that we are dealing with young people who pledge their lives and their allegiance to helping Olympus, to protecting Olympus, when what has Olympus done for them? Their parents are the reason why they have to live in a camp and be afraid for their lives constantly of monsters trying to kill them. So I never, other than, like, just really weak parental bonds, I never really understood why they felt so strong to them. I mean, the relationship between Percy and Poseidon is just kind of there. I mean, they have a relationship, yes, but it's all like, he's my favorite son. And I guess because of my own background of mythology, I just also call bullshit on that, because no, they don't really care about these children. If they did, they wouldn't just be having them for shits and giggles and knowing that they couldn't take care of them. But it just like, I understand for the genre they had to do that and make it a very kind of like that kind of story where it's very clear cut. But it just never clicked for me. And I mean, they finally addressed that kind of issue towards the end and with certain people. But I still kind of felt like it was their own fault. But, you know, it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecy things that's going to be handled there. And so, like I said before, when handling the incest of the actual Greek gods, Percy Jackson is pretty good as a series in handling that. But then, of course, the tricky issue is, of course, all these people hang out together and they're teenagers, so what happens if they fall in love at the camp? This was hilarious because the whole excuse was like, well, the DNA doesn't really count. So, like, they can't be with people who were in their same house. But, like, as the example was, if a child of Aphrodite and a child of Hephaestus get together, that's okay. That's kind of like, no. No, it's not. Okay. But if you want to say that, sure. I mean, well, technically a child of Hephaestus and Aphrodite would not technically be a problem because there still wouldn't be any blood relation, but like, alright, you know, Poseidon is Athena's uncle, and Percy and Annabeth are love interests. They're related. I mean, it's like, I know that they don't want them to be related because that would make it kind of weird, but they are. I like the way the gods are portrayed. He really got to the heart of most of them. But at the same time, I feel like his portrayal of the female goddesses was kind of not as good as his portrayal of the male gods. I mean, I was very happy that he didn't make Hades a villain. I was very happy that he kept Zeus's douchebaggery. I was very happy that characters like, you know, were able to stay close to their mythological counterparts. It wasn't trying to make them whoopies. But however, I feel like the female goddesses kind of got shafted. They really kind of seemed like footnotes, and they didn't really have any complexity. Except for Athena, none of them are really become important. And like, the way that Hera, Demeter, and Persephone were portrayed, especially the last two women in the final book, which is really kind of obnoxious to me. I mean, Hera kind of just gets, you know, totally tossed into the whole, oh, she's an evil bitch mom thing. And you know what? Like I said in my Hercules Legendary Journey review, yes, Hera is not the nicest deity. Yes, she has her faults, but her side of the issue is completely never shown. It's just kind of like she's petty. And the same thing is done with other people. Like, for example, when you go to Poseidon's world and Percy meets Poseidon's wife and she kind of looks at him coldly and washes away, there is never this feeling, I don't know if maybe it's just me, but there's an undertone of their being petty. Like, when they go to the underworld and Persephone does not want to be hearing about Nico's mother, Maria, kind of like, can we not talk about that woman? There's a sense that they're supposed to be looked at as childish and very petty for these actions, but it's just kind of like, their husbands perpetually cheat on them. Constantly. And if we're going to say that, like, you know, these gods have existed from when they were created in ancient Greece to now, that's a lot of infidelity. And it just was like, I felt like their anger was just completely negated. Like, their right to be upset at the infidelity of their husbands was completely just kind of, and it's like, you know, it'd be one thing, like, you can't, like, with, like, Hephaestus and Aphrodite, like, and then sometimes they would make it, like, so apparently Hephaestus has his own camp, and he has his own children, but who sleeps with Hephaestus? And I'm not talking about, like, him being infirm, but, like, he's never portrayed as someone who is that kind of deity, who would sleep around. Same thing with Hades, like, for some reason, like, his relationship with Maria, who is the mother of Nico and Bianca, that relationship and how it was portrayed, especially in the last Olympian, when we actually get a flashback scene and see, like, what happened with their relationship, was just so out of place to me. I mean, on record, the only time we have seen Hades cheat is once, and that's with, Mint, or whatever the hell her name was, and she got turned into a tree, and you know, there's never, like, any recollection. Like, we know Apollo, Perpetual, we know Poseidon, we know Zeus, we know Hermes, we know these other gods have children, but it's just kind of like Hades. Why would he, like, that's not what he would do, especially with all the effort it took for him to get Persephone. He would just be like, I don't care what Persephone thinks, I'm gonna sleep with whoever I want, blah, blah, blah. And then, at the same time, there is this kind of bleeding heart thing where we're supposed to feel really sorry for them for having to not be with these women. Just kind of like, but you know you can't. You know what you're doing. It's not like it's a one-time thing. It's not even like a two-time thing. It's you do this all the time. You always cheat on your wives. Most of the time y'all get caught, and you have these illegitimate children. Why are you, like, we see the one instance with, you know, Maria and Hades. We see little stuff with, like, how Zeus is proud of one of his children, all kinds of stuff. What about all the other women? And we think about it too. We know Zeus is a rapist. Zeus is a rapist. It's not brought up in Percy Jackson, but Zeus is a rapist. If you know Greek mythology, he has raped women in the form of bulls and swans and all kind and gold showers and not pee. So, like, we're supposed to feel like, oh, it's so bad for them. They can't be with the women that they love. It's like, no. They fuck up a lot. And so that really bothered me, because I just kind of felt like, I understand that, you know, you want to talk about how it's hard for the kids at Camp Half-Blood. And I get that. They're your protagonists. They're the ones you want to focus on. You want to make it about their issues. But you also did such a really great job of showing the complexity of some of these male characters. So why couldn't you have done it with someone like Hera, who is a very complex deity and would have a lot to offer in terms of dealing with the themes of family and relationships? But it's just confirmed into her whole like evil stepmother bit, which I personally think is just kind of very, not disrespectful, but just very like, it's the bare bones of that character and what she is capable of doing. I have heard she plays a bigger role in the Sons of Neptune book and the other Heroes of Olympus series, so when I read those books, I'll check that out. Then finally, the only last real issue I had in terms of character writing was the tensions between Annabeth and Rachel. Rachel comes up later in the series, and she's kind of hinted of being another love interest for Percy, and that whole love triangle bullshit happens. And it's not like a real love triangle thing. Like, the way it concludes was actually kind of well and interesting for me, so that was okay. But just how Annabeth would just be so rude to her and have this whole animosity thing. Like, I know that, you know, it makes sense because Athena's a very jealous goddess too, and she'd be jealous too. But it was just so petty and so childish, and I wish that it wasn't there, because I feel where it's real in this series, where it's really about the adventure and the suspense and the action, you don't need to have a love triangle. You don't need to have that kind of thing, especially because for the demographic that this is catered towards, that wouldn't appeal to them anyway. And the way it's written, it's not really like a main focus of anything, so it didn't bother me in the sense that I thought it was horrible and I hated it. But it was one of those things that it's like, it was a hampering on a really great story. Like, it's like the few things that I really had to critique, that I really found questionable about it, are just, you know, minor complaints about something that I overall really enjoy. Because I don't want to sing this praises too much, because I don't want to leave too many spoilers, but I did enjoy a lot of how this series constructed itself. So, my favorite characters in this series, I gotta say, I love Tyson. Tyson was my little cutie pie. That was my Cyclops. I love him. I was always so afraid that something bad was going to happen to him, and I'm so glad that he's okay. I really like Luke. His character and how his story kind of went full circle was really appealing to me. I felt like his story, to me, was one of the best things about Percy Jackson, and I'll get to that in a second. But, like, his storyline, how it connected, how it really dealt with so many of the issues dealing with, like, the lost Greek mythology. I feel like that was a really great story that was being told. I like Annabeth overall. I felt like her addition to the team, her role was really great as being, you know, she was smart, she was competent, she was a leader in her own right. She was Percy's equal she wasn't just a love interest, she was a fleshed out female character. I also really liked Percy, and I also liked Sally, who is Percy's mother. I liked Charisse, who was the daughter of Ares, and she's a badass, and that's why I enjoyed her. And then, of course, I love Hera, but that's my own personal bias. My least favorite character was just Kronos. He was just a dickhead, and there's never anything where I actually root for Kronos. He's a baby eater, so those are not good people. My favorite storyline of all the things that were happening in Percy Jackson, and there's a lot of different storylines, different arcs that were going on, my favorite was Luke's story. Luke's story arc, to me, encompasses the real depths of what I think you can do with Greek mythology and young adult. How it dealt with the neglect of parenthood in Greek mythology, but just in life in general. I mean, this is something that anyone can relate to if you have a hard relationship with your parents, or you have, you know, if you're a child divorced and you don't see your parents that often. How, you know, how he suffered because of what was happening, and how that story leads to changes. It's a real example of, you know, the villain story not just being something where it's like, oh, he's evil for the lulz. He's not evil just because. He's evil because of a product of how other people made him, of how society in itself made him into a place where he didn't want to support the gods anymore, where they turned, in his eyes, they turned their backs on him. So he was just like, okay, screw you, I'm going to get my revenge in my own way. And so, but how his story comes to a close and how it fills in with the prophecy, which is, oh my god, it was so good. Like, when I was reading it and I knew it was unfolding that way, I'm just kind of like, yeah, this is the right way to end the story. This is the right way to make this story work. So I loved it. My least favorite storyline was Grover's whole Pan thing. I mean, I'm not really the biggest fan of Pan in terms of, you know, minor god beings. And Grover, while he's enjoyable, I don't really care for his character that much either. So that thing was kind of like, in the Labyrinth book, I was kind of like, yeah, I know we have to deal with this, but I could really, you know, give a fuck about this storyline. I know I shouldn't curse in this, should I? It is a children's book series. I didn't give a fruit about his storyline. I thought it was silly. So I'm sorry it's discombobulated review. I wasn't really sure how to go about this because let me just say this. Percy Jackson was a well-written, well-constructed story, a well-constructed series that really managed to bring maturity to a children's book series about Greek mythology. And I feel like this is one of those series where I feel it understands its audience, respects its audience, and can challenge them with a complex story material. And you think about it, this guy, he taught this, so he knows his stuff. The mythology, for the most part, is right. He still does the whole Hercules thing, because, you know, it's easy to say, and most people know it as Hercules, even though it's wrong. But, you know, on the whole, he knows his stuff. He's giving you the right information, and it's a building block. Like how Xena and Hercules were influences for me to learn. This is a more accurate way for young people to learn about it. And even if you already know it, it's also enjoyable because you get to see, you know, the Minotaur again. You get to see all these different people from these stories, but different because they have grown, they have evolved since on, because they've moved the time period on to now. And so I feel like it's a great experience if you know mythology and if you don't know it yet. And I really recommend this series overall.